Hey guys, we're on a new episode of Vibe Check, and I'm Ronald Go.
And I'm Misha Rahim, and today we are taking you on, a mental health journey.
A mental health journey into your mind.
Wow, Ron, your energy is on another level today. We're clearly excited. But today's topic is something very relatable to us, particularly because given the current situation of, receiving distressing news. So the topic that we're looking at today is doom scrolling. Now, you guys must be wondering what doom scrolling is all about, and that's what we aim to find out today and how to cope particularly with this phenomena. But generally, doom scrolling is usually what happens when, our daily scroll of news and social media becomes a source of anxiety, depression. So it's really, really something that is relatable to, I think, all of us. And today we have a very, very, very special guest, Ron. I mean, is our favorite psychologist who has been featured in most of our stories. Let's give it up for Dr. Annabelle Chow.
Thank you so much.
As we call Anna.
That's a really warm welcome. There are a lot of dopamine here in the room. Right from the minute.
We're all just high. But to give Anna an introduction, she owns a clinic, Annabelle Psychology. You also are a clinical psychologist and you specialize a lot on, if I'm not wrong, on individuals with personality disorders, particularly. But you have a strong interest in women-related issues, right, Anna? That's what I heard.
Yes, I do. Yeah. So my two primary interests are complex trauma. So that includes like childhood trauma, and then they usually manifest in difficulties in relationship issues, functioning in everyday life, or they might be self-harming, or they might feel like life is chronically empty. And then my other passion is women's health. So anything relating to women. Yeah. So those are my two primary.
So these are really key, interesting aspects. Especially we have seen like the evolution of women mental health. People speaking up more often. There's also women's health as well. People are much more open now. So it's great to it's great to know that you're doing your thing.
I try. Thanks for having me on today.
So I'm quite sure you know what's been happening in the world, and I mean, people in my generation, we use social media a lot, and that's how we get some of the news, right? Sometimes it can get quite overwhelming, So to kick off this, I wouldn't say interview, but anyway, first question is, what are the typical psychological and emotional reactions people experience when they engage in things like doom scrolling and excessive social media use?
Okay, so I think the first thing that usually comes up, even before the anxiety and depression, is probably sense of helplessness. You just feel like there's so many things out of your control that is happening in the world. And earlier, like even Nish is saying, I feel like I should help. I feel like I should do something, but there's nothing that you can do. All the news that you're reading, whether locally or internationally, these are things that are out of your control. And if you keep scrolling, and the thing about, I don't know the science behind that, but you know how when you start looking at certain news, then more of the same type of news pop up? Or like our phones listen to us these days. So we're having conversations and your phone will have the advertisement or the news pop up. And then you just keep reading and reading, and that will fuel the sense of anxiety because you feel like, oh no, there's so much of this happening that I didn't even know in the first place. I thought it was just like that. Then more and more comes up, and then you realize, oh, the magnitude is really huge. And as you go along, even myself, I'll think about, oh no, what kind of world have I brought my children into, and what kind of world they're going to grow up in. So if you keep getting preoccupied with these thoughts, then you get a sense of very depressive feeling.
I just want to say from my personal experience as well, I've noticed some friends who have posted about some recent news, right? And there's this, I wouldn't want to say level of guilt, but there's this level of inclination of, oh, if I'm not sharing on social media about a relevant news topic, I'm not supporting the cause. So I'm not using my voice, right? How would you advise people to navigate this sort of situation? Maybe you're not as compelled to post about negative news. Maybe there's some people who choose to, I just want to post positive stuff because there's so much negative news online, right? What sort of advice would you give to people who are in such a situation?
The first thing I would recommend is make sure it's from a credible source, because there's so many fake news happening today, and sometimes even I fall trapped to that. So just if I can share, yesterday I was so sad because Matthew Perry died. And I feel like I grew up with him. But actually, to be honest, I had to actually take a step back and check, is this fake news? Is this real? Like, so check credible sources first. Always check like public health sources, sources from the ministry. Who are you getting the information from? Then maybe also take a step back and be a bit more mindful of how you're feeling at that time of sharing, and actually what is your intention of sharing. So sometimes we might do it quite impulsively. You just hit the share button, that's quite easy. But we may not actually be aware why we're doing it in the first place. So check in, am I feeling really anxious? Am I feeling really nervous at the moment? Or actually I feel like I'm feeling calm and it makes sense to share with my network this news so that they know. And I think it's like a wise mind decision. It's good to go, let's share it. Or it's like, I share it and then I feel better. So if you share it and you feel better, then I'll say take a step back and don't do it first.
As producers, we have to keep up with current news and information. There's been a lot of distressing videos out there and everything. And you kind of, like for me, I kind of tend to be, I try to not get too into it, but there are times where, of course, it does affect me in terms of, seeing all these images, seeing all these news and updates consistently. I was wondering, what are the signs that, I don't know, for those who could also relate to me, what are signs that they should sort of look out for to know that they might be entering this doom scrolling kind of situation or condition in a way?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, I would say it is an appropriate reaction to feel anxious, to feel helpless, to feel scared when you read about nasty things that are happening around the world. We do live in an unstable and quite a new and different world as we know it before, even though that's also quite questionable. We did have crisis and world wars that happened, except that we didn't have social media at that point and the news didn't spread as quickly as now. But I think we do live in an unstable world and there are always going to be crises. So maybe just being even kind to ourselves, that it's really normal to feel anxious, feel scared, feel nervous if we are reading about this news. That's really normal. But if we find ourselves scrolling for more of it, and the more we scroll, the more we cannot stop scrolling. Because the more we scroll, there's something called like a dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that emits in our brain that gives us the pleasure of scrolling. So it's very strange because you feel anxious, right? But your brain is also releasing pleasure neurotransmitters called dopamine that fuels the scrolling because you feel good scrolling. So that's why you keep going through TikTok videos, because you have that feel good factor. That's why it's easy to get addicted to something. You get a lot of dopamine when you take chocolates, when you do things that you enjoy, right? So the brain is releasing that. So it continues that, it fuels that. So maybe then take a step back and notice that, hey, I'm actually scrolling a lot. Take a break. Actually set a conscious limit. I think a lot of this scrolling is probably done unconsciously. You just keep going without really with intention or even paying attention to the fact that you're doing that. So take a step back, be aware that, hey, I think I'm scrolling a lot of this. I'm starting to feel nervous. I'm starting to feel anxious. Let's stop. Can I do something else? Can I actually take a break? Can I speak to another human being? Put my phone down? Can I go get a cup of tea? Can I go for a walk? Can I talk to somebody else? Can I watch Netflix, read a book, do something else? And if I feel like it's overwhelming, I think we can also talk to somebody else about what we are scrolling about and hopefully get a bit more balanced perspective. I'm an advocate for balance because I think life needs to be lived in moderation. So some of my patients actually say, I cannot deal with the COVID news at that point. Every day there were a lot of numbers being reported. So I avoid, I don't even touch my phone. I've disabled Facebook. I've disabled any kind of social media so that I don't read about that. I'm not so sure about that because you do still live in the real world. You kind of still need to be connected to the news, right? Then I've got the other end of the spectrum where it's the doom scrolling, where you cannot help it but you keep going. So somewhere in the middle, having a bit of awareness that you need to keep in touch with the news, but when it gets overwhelming, set yourself a limit, take a bit of time off from it, do something else. And if you need to, talk to somebody about your concerns and get a balanced perspective.
Actually, and you brought up a very interesting point, talking to somebody. That is, I would reckon, if it's like the extreme case where, you sort of feel like it's affecting your everyday life.
Yeah.
Right?
But I need to say,
Yeah.
don't talk to people who are also doom scrolling.
It's like the blind leading the blind, no?
Yes, so talk to that person that you trust that has historically been able to give you a balanced perspective, who has a good degree of empathy and understanding, but also knock some sense into you.
Right.
So if you flock together with everyone who is doom scrolling, you're going to get even more stressed.
No, but then that's the question I wanted to ask. When we need intervention, for example, it has reached to the point where, after doom scrolling, like we do try to take breaks, but it's come to the point where it affects you at maybe at work, or you're still thinking about things. When is the right time that we sort of need to realize that, okay, I think this is getting a bit too much and it's time for you to sort of maybe look for a psychologist or therapist? Maybe you could give us some insights on that.
So generally, if you become so preoccupied by it that you cannot function at all, you go to work, you're thinking about it, you're working on something, your hands are typing something else, but your mind is just thinking about it all the time. It's affecting your ability to go out and meet your friends. Or if you meet your friends, that's all you can talk about. It's affecting your appetite and your sleep. So you find yourself staying up because you are scrolling more and more and you're getting really nervous, really anxious. I've got people who tell me they don't even dare to sleep because they feel like if they sleep, they don't really know what will happen when they are sleeping, because the world is such a dangerous place. So yes, the world is dangerous to a certain extent, but we can still learn to adapt and survive in this. We survived. The dinosaurs didn't. We must be doing something right.
Right.
So usually if you measure it by that, it's affecting you so much that you're so preoccupied. It affects your sleep, your basic functions, your appetite, your inability to actually function as a friend, as a family member, or at work. Then I will say it's time to see a psychologist. Before then, you can also try to kind of change the way you think about things. Maybe put awareness to the fact about things that are within your control and things that are not within your control. So all these world crises that are happening, they're unfortunately not within our control. But how much we scroll and how we respond to it is entirely within our control. So if we focus and put energy on things that are within our control, then I think we have a better bet at increasing our mental well-being, less anxious. And actually the research shows, I was reading up this research from the US. They said about 16.5% of the participants actually had reported that they experienced like severe symptoms from doom scrolling. And out of the 16%, right, about 75% experienced mental health conditions, and the other 61% experienced physical symptoms. So, when they start scrolling, they get tension, then they get sick, they feel physically unwell, they feel nausea, and all of this affects their ability to function.
But another thing I wanted to ask you, and I think I'm very, very curious, does age come into play? Do you think doom scrolling is like, in general, it can impact anyone who's, reading this news very consistently? Or do you think that, there could be a specific, maybe the younger generation, the older generation? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so this will be my personal thoughts, not backed up by research. I think that the existing research, a lot of them are conducted in our younger population, but they're not really conducted in our geriatric population. So if we actually say that the younger generation is more susceptible, while yes, it makes sense because we are the ones who are on our phones most of the time, I think that it's also not a very fair reflection, because I'll give you an example. My grandma doom scrolls, but not on the phone. Coffee shop talk, newspapers, news, like all the other different types of medium, but actually the philosophy is not the same. So with her, right, she has a lot of conversations with me about scamming, because there's a lot of like scamming of the elderly, scamming generally, right? And she's preoccupied with that. But because doom scrolling actually takes the method of using a phone and going through, so I think it affects people of different ages in different ways. But maybe what we know of it more often would be in the young adult population, in the adolescent population. Because we are the ones, look, you have your phones on you.
Yeah.
You're holding your phones all the time.
The
Literally.
notifications are coming up right now. It's crazy because,
Yeah.
but given the exposure for us, news, social media, do you think that also is probably, it plays a huge role in the proliferation of, or this prevalence of doom scrolling now? Do you think that it's a huge thing compared to past back then?
I would think so, yeah, because in the past we had lesser like social media. A lot of us don't actually get our news from formal news sources these days, right? We get our news update from social media. So yes, I do agree with you. And maybe that's the point where we might want to try to set some healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really in moderation, and we've got to be self-aware about what are the things that we're consuming in terms of the content. Like you mentioned, it's all about credibility.
Credibility and also setting healthy boundaries, like how we generally recommend trying your best not to check your work emails after hours. How the guilty laughter.
Boss, I'm looking at you. I love Yahoo. I'm just like, I'm out of this. Okay,
Or like don't set your notifications for the news to come in. So you have to actually open the app to read it instead of the notifications being pushed in either by hourly or just whenever it's just refreshing in the background.
That's so interesting, because I never really, sometimes we're too invested in our jobs that we forget that these little things matters, right? Ron, what are your thoughts on that?
Maybe for me, just approaching from a social media perspective more than an email perspective, right? I think, like you mentioned, most people our age consume news media through social media, right? And I do know of friends who, like you mentioned, have two extremes. Either I just want to stop social media, I have a break from all the news stuff, and then they never come back to social media. And then you have the other spectrum of people who just like bombard you with like Instagram stories of the same news but different outlets, right? Maybe what kind of advice would you give? Okay, maybe the advice for both different parties. So let's start off with like the first one who's like, oh, I need to be I don't want to say a social justice warrior, but people who stand for a certain message, right? What kind of advice or tips would you give for them so that they do not fall into maybe a potential trap of getting doom scrolled or overwhelmed by the news that they share out of goodwill?
So I think it's very personal. It's a personal experience. So for me, I can't deal with it, right? So I then unfollow. Or I hide notifications.
Yeah.
So you're still my friend. I still like you, but I want to know other things that are happening with you. Then I will just hide notifications. So I think maybe this is also an opportunity for us to get to know ourselves a little bit better. What are our preferences? What are our likes? What are our dislikes? Like, I enjoy looking at the most recent thing, Halloween photos, everybody's Halloween parties. I enjoy looking at what everyone's coming, like, getting up to, dressing in different costumes and making a lot of effort for that.
Right.
I don't quite enjoy like a repeat of the news that I get elsewhere. So I think it really depends on your personal preference. I think maybe a guiding principle can be, how does that make me feel when I see so much of this? Is this actually what is healthy for me? So I always try to avoid good versus bad because they're quite binary and they're not very helpful labels. But maybe I'll ask myself, like, is this healthy? Is this helpful? So if I keep saying it and I actually feel worse and worse and worse, then I just hide the notifications, right? Or sometimes it may not even be that. It might be, a common one that a lot of my teenage clients will tell me is like, oh, my friends are showing a lot of their extravagant lifestyle, the kind of exciting, beautiful holidays they keep going to, and it affects my self-esteem. It affects how small I feel. I feel so FOMO, I'm missing out and I feel really miserable. Is it helpful to keep looking at this? You've got other friends, so maybe hide those notifications, right? And on the other hand, when you are the one who is updating all this, maybe we can also share with intention.
Right.
Like, what is the purpose of you sharing this? And how are you feeling when you're sharing this? what do you hope to get out of sharing this? Right? So if it's about education, then we also need to kind of put our mind to if there's too much, right? The thing about human behavior is we'll just ignore it, right? So I was working with the banks at some point a couple of months ago, and we were talking about how, you know, you open your bank apps now, and they got a lot of notifications about be careful that, you know, this is a scam message and things like that. Do you guys even read it? Yeah, I don't
A
either.
minute of silence for us.
I don't. So it's an overload of information. So we just click close.
Right.
Right? And we don't read it. So I think it's the same when we share too much of the same kind of news. Actually, our friends might just kind of close.
Yeah.
So if we have a bit of that awareness, then maybe we can share a bit more wisely.
Actually, I was struggling with this because I have a friend on Instagram. He's very vocal about certain things, and it came to a point where every Insta story that he's posting, it was giving me a sense, a bit of uneasiness. At first, I was very guilty because I thought like, oh, if I were to mute, would I be that kind of friend who's just like, oh, maybe maybe I'm overthinking this. But eventually, like what you mentioned, because it's taking a toll on me. I'm seeing the repeatedly Insta stories and all of that, so I decided to mute. But you know, like you mentioned, we sort of love them. We appreciate them as friends and people in your life. But sometimes when it gets too much, it does. But that's for me because, you know, like for us, you know, we can come to a decision. But for Anna, for those people who are like, maybe sometimes they doubt themselves. They're like, oh, you know, maybe I'm being too oversensitive. I shouldn't be, you know, my friend is, you know, being vocal. I should be happy and supporting him. What do you have to say for those people who are like kind of second guessing and be like, oh, you know, am I a horrible friend if I don't, you know, support this?
You can be happy for them,
Yeah.
and you can be supportive of them, and you can also look after yourself at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or another, right? So you can still be happy that they're assertive, that you know they're vocal, they're happy to share, and you're happy for them. But you can also learn to look after yourself, to be aware that it's actually making me feel quite anxious. It's making me think that this world is really too dangerous to live in. It's making it difficult for me to step out of my house, to fall asleep, to talk to my friends. And if I continue like that, I'm probably going to be a nasty friend because I will either not turn up or I will just be really disengaged because I'm really tired. So it's kind of the concept that, you know, in an airplane, you have to wear your own, you have to help yourself, wear your own oxygen mask before you can help somebody else. So you also have to look after yourself while respecting that other people have the right to share, to, you know, as much or as little as they want.
I needed to hear this because honestly, this was something that I was struggling with. You know, when you adore your friends so much, then when you see them sharing all these kind of things, it's a bit like, am I a bad friend? But you know, like you mentioned, you need to take care of yourself first more than anything else. And I think it's a great reminder for viewers as well. It's super important. But and I'm quite curious because for you yourself, being a psychologist, right, you also deal with a lot of clients as well, you know, and you probably sometimes have to sort of do a bit of research on them, I would reckon, and try. For you, how do you also draw the boundaries for you, like when it's getting too much for you?
What do you mean by research?
Like, you know, like trying to find out more details or like, you know, when they sort of come up to you and to tell you their stories, right? For you, mentally, how do you deal with that as a psychologist? Because do you get counseling as well or therapy?
I
as well?
do.
You
Actually, this afternoon, my therapy is this afternoon. So I do. And I always advocate that psychologists must have your own therapy. And I'm very vocal about that. You know, as long as anyone asks, I will share. I do have regular therapy myself. I do have regular supervision myself. So supervision will be more supervising the work that I do. So it's about, I'll de-identify my patients and talk about what I did with them, what the presentations are, where I could have done better, where I did okay, and, you know, what kind of readings I can take up to improve in this area. So it's very clinical in focus. Therapy for me will be talking about how I feel in the session because it's dynamic, right? I'm working with another person, and patients may often forget this, but we also have a lot of issues of our own, and sometimes that might interact with what they're bringing up to us, right? So they might have an experience that we had before, and we might feel a certain degree of like escalated empathy, and I think that it's important that we organize our feelings, we make sense of our feelings, and we make sense of our thoughts before we can go in with clarity of mind to help them. So yes, I do receive therapy and supervision to help manage my work. Other than that, then it's just engaging in self-care, knowing my boundaries, knowing when I check my emails, when I respond to them. I always make sure that in between patients, I have like a turnover time. And all my patients know this about me, and it's a little bit embarrassing to say this in public.
No, we've done worse. I mean, look at Ron and I.
Oh, let me.
No.
Every time I open my door to let my patient out and my next patient comes in, they always know that Annabelle needs to go to the toilet first.
It's your time.
It's my time. I just need
Yeah.
to take that walk,
Yeah.
and I need to come back. And that's the time that I turn over. That's the time that I recollect my thoughts, my feelings, and be ready for my next client so that I don't take what's left over here and spill it over to the next patient. So all my patients know, they'll have the knowing nod, and they're like, they know, and they're very kind. Yeah, so I think knowing what works for you, water is very important for me. So I always have a kettle of water next to me, and I just keep drinking, or like tea or coffee, things that help me power through the day.
Absolutely. You know, Anna, I think it's very important what you shared. And I think the reason why I wanted to ask you that question is because a lot of people, they shy away from talking about. There's still some people out there who still shy away from seeking help, talking about therapy. But you being a clinical psychologist yourself, so open to it, sharing that you are doing this as well, because you also need to keep yourself in check. I think that's very admirable for us to also know as well, and for readers, for viewers to also understand that it's something that I think we face also when we interview people. It's still that stigma that's being faced, and it doesn't matter whether it's doom scrolling or whatever. But every single time I realize is when I speak to some interviewees or newsmakers, they always make it a point to say that, oh, I'm not certain whether I should be seeking help for this. I'm still on the fence. But given how it's important, like you mentioned, to take care of your emotions, to make sure boundaries are set, irrespective of what industry you're in, I think it's an important reminder.
But I think it all starts with education, right? It
Yeah.
starts with, videos that you are doing so that the public knows that, actually it's really okay, that it's also really normal that I may experience symptoms of anxiety and depression if I keep scrolling, like doom scrolling. They may not have the awareness before they watch this. And I think your work in educating the public helps to reduce the stigma. And helps to make it a bit more accessible and okay to talk about mental health issues or even talk about seeking help.
I have a quick question. So I think you brought up a really interesting point about, for you, when you go for your psychology or sessions with clients, right, you take that toilet break. So maybe to put it in like the doom scrolling perspective, right, what would you suggest for people what are some ways they can do to take breaks from like the news? Like for you physically in a session, right, it's like you take a toilet break. So maybe like let's say if I'm doom scrolling and like, wow, a lot of like negative news, right? What are some like ways that people can take
Put the
that
phone
break?
down and go and pee.
I thought you were going to say watch cat or dogs videos.
Then you'll still be on your phone. I think, okay, in all seriousness, I think it's having that awareness, right? So for me, I have the awareness that I need to take a break from this patient to the next patient because I need to switch over. So I think the first thing is first having the awareness that, oh, that's a lot. And I think the good thing about phones these days is they actually send you a report, don't you? Like they send you a notification about how much time you've been using your phone, and they actually break it down. So maybe have a look at that and not just close that notification.
Please, we are all guilty. Like Ron was like, I don't know why we're all guilty of that. But yeah, but it's true. I think it's something you should look out for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. If you look at the breakdown, you realize that, oh, I'm actually spending a lot of time on social media. And actually, a lot of articles out there would consider that to be brain rot. Because if you keep scrolling negative things, it's like an analogy that I share with my patients. Think of your brain as real estate. Right. Do you want your real estate to be manicured with beautiful plants, flowers? Or do you want to keep like throwing rubbish into it and then it gets really polluted?
Right.
Right? Of course, in every estate, there will be a certain degree of pollution. But the more you pay attention to it, the more you see. And in some sense, there are also evidence to say that, oh, since people are littering, then you're more likely to just litter, then you just add to the pollution. Then your brain will not fetch a high price when you try to rent or buy or sell. Right, so your brain is like real estate, and if you want it to be manicured, then we do it with intention, right? We try to go and mow the grass, we pick up the litter, we throw things into the rubbish and in the rubbish bins and the recycling bins. So in that same vein, being aware that hey, this is getting too much. It's too much pollution. It's too much noise. Let me see if I can clean it up a bit. Maybe putting the phone down or like even closing the apps can be first mini steps. So don't aim to do like, oh, I'm not going to do this for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. But small, tiny, achievable steps so you feel confident and you feel like, yes, I was just telling you, I love taking things off my to-do list.
Striking off.
Yes.
It's our go-to, right? Like you feel the accomplishment.
Yes, then it's like dopamine releasing. So in the same vein, if you just do a little bit, you just close for the next 10 minutes, you close for the next 15 minutes, you feel confident, then go and read like 2 pages of something, the newspaper, or like a book, or like clean up your room, or even go for a walk, go downstairs, buy a drink, go to your neighborhood. So do something that is different, like just as a structured break, and then try to increase that windows over time.
So it's really like doing the small things that, that matter. The simplest things can make a difference. But wow, look, we learned a lot, I've learned a lot. To be honest, I've learned more about doomscrolling, how to cope with my emotions, not being afraid to just take the first step and, establishing boundaries. Looks like Anna is always on the journey to educate us, Aaron. This is why we keep coming back to her. That's why.
Thank you. That's a big compliment. We have good chemistry.
I think we do actually, come and think of it. But it's sad to say this chemistry has got to end since the episode has got to end. But we hope that the viewers, learn something, and we hope the strategies and whatever that Anna has shared, very wisely, very, very enthusiastically is going to help you in your journey as well amidst this whole climate. So that's us. I'm Nisha.
I'm Ronald, and if anything, the whole video, right, the biggest takeaway for me is your brain is your real estate.
Yes, what an analogy. It's all...
I'm glad that was helpful for you.
It's great. It was really helpful.
Yeah.
Yes, so if you like more content like this, you can watch all of our videos on Yahoo Southeast Asia on YouTube. We're also on our website, Facebook, and Instagram. So yeah, that's the latest episode of Vibe Check.
In the meantime, make sure you stay healthy, stay fresh, and just stay lovely, guys. Take care. Bye.